Hello, good afternoon. We're here for our homework check-in for the LawHelp Interactive Developer Training. I am going to transfer this over to Bart and Mark. I also want to let you know that John Mayer is here in case there's A to J author questions or topics. So without more, since it's a small group, I'm going to unmute all of you. So just mute yourself on your back end. In case you want to talk, you won't be muting on our end. So I'm going to do that now. Okay. Mark, do you want me to, somebody wants to be panelist or are we?
What you make?
Sorry?
I think we're all set.
Okay.
And it looks like folks are still muted, so they may be self-muted. So if you want to, I think Brittany had been one of the volunteers to present today. Andres also, but I don't see him here yet. So Brittany, if you could unmute yourself, and if you're still willing to volunteer to talk about the homework experience, please let me know. Brittany says she can't unmute herself. Let me see if I can, what I can do here. Oh, okay, now she's on. You're good. Okay.
Yeah.
And are you still game to talk about your homework experience?
Yeah, I might fumble through it a little bit because I did it a couple weeks ago, but I did review it, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so let me make you presenter, and you can share your screen and talk about how things went. So you started with automating the children of the marriage, which is kind of the basic repeat, right? And Brittany, we're not hearing you if you're speaking. Oh, looks like you're muted by organizer. So I'm unmuting you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So we started with creating, am I muted again?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So we created the children variables and the child count variables here. Basically, we set it up to ask how many children, and if it's more children, then we created the list and then the dialogue that repeats for each entry of the child.
Right, so go ahead, yeah.
We also learned how to create the variables if the child is a minor or not a minor, so that they can be included or excluded from the petition if they're over 18, and then also to sort by age.
Did you run into any difficulties in the course of doing that piece?
No, not so much as not while doing it, because, you know, like, we're watching the video, we're doing it step by step, and no problems with that. And then I think the one problem I did run into is, I think in your example, there was, I think it's where the child's last name is like auto-filled, but that wasn't showing up for me.
Okay. When you say, oh, it was auto-filled from the, based on the party's names.
Right, right.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, that, I'm not sure where in the process that happened. So it might have been, that might have been something that inadvertently appeared in the video, or it may have been something that was a piece that was omitted someplace along the line by somebody. So, okay, so, and did you have any, in the course of doing that, the kind of the basic automation, repeat automation, did you have any, did any questions arise?
No. That seems pretty straightforward. I mean, it's a lot of steps, but it seems relatively straightforward.
Okay. And I see that you have the smart returns set, and that the end of that paragraph, the children of the marriage, you've got the pipe character. Presumably that was added automatically.
I think so.
Yep. Okay, so why don't you tell us, continue and tell us further about your experience.
Well, one thing I found interesting, so I'm still struggling with logic. And so this thing up here, I started working on my own project, and then I ran into this where if we're going to use multiple counts or a single count, I went back and used this logic here, the if count of children of marriage, so I could use the are versus is.
Yep.
So that was helpful. I wasn't sure, I was reviewing what the homework said to do, and it says defaulting values in a repeat.
Okay.
And I didn't remember what that was.
Okay. I'm just looking. So actually, I see in the homework, it says add the dialogue script to default the child's last name to the petitioners, but only if the child's first name is answered. So if you go to the children repeat dialogue, let's take a look at that. And you go to the script for the dialogue. Okay. Okay, so that should have been defaulting, that should have auto-populated the last name of the child if you had answered the petitioner's last name.
Oh, that's probably it, because I don't think I put in an answer. I just tested from this stage.
Okay. And did you have any questions about, this is a little tricky with repeats. You have to be very careful when you default or set values in a repeating dialogue, because if you don't condition it somehow or limit it somehow, HotDocs will start adding willy-nilly extra repeats to the repeating dialogue, and you end up with a whole bunch of extra repeats that you weren't looking for. And that's why you have to have that logic if answered child first name, on the assumption that somebody's always going to answer the first name, which is a reasonable assumption probably. And I see that Andres has joined us. Let me unmute him as well. And you're self-muted, Andres, if you want to also unmute yourself, and if you'd like to jump in at some point and talk about your homework experience. Oh, you still says you're muted. Keep trying to unmute you, and okay, so now it says you're just self-muted. So if you do want to unmute, and
good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Or good afternoon for some.
Yeah. Are you still game to be part of the join Brittany and volunteering to talk about the homework?
Absolutely. I just have to do a little bit trick here to jump on my other computer where I have my homework, which
Okay.
unfortunately is not this one. So just if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll go ahead and do that really quick. I'm sorry
Okay.
I'm a bit late this morning.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue with Brittany, and then at some point we can maybe switch over and you could talk about your experience. And feel free as we go through it to jump in. You know, if you had to talk about your experience, even if you're not showing your screen, you can certainly talk about it.
Sounds good. And I
So
wrote down some of my questions too, because like Brittany, I think there were many areas where I was doing things, but then there were underlying questions that I had that weren't clear.
okay.
Can
So
we, sorry, can we go over this item here, B, sorting list? Because when I was reviewing before we started, I was trying to figure out where I had done these things.
okay, so that would be in the repeat. That would be in one of the repeating dialogues. So if you go to, if you double click on repeat children of the marriage in the right in the template, you've got sort by child DOBDA. So it's
Okay.
sorting by the child's date of birth, ascending, which means it's going to start with the oldest child because that's the earliest date of birth, and then give you the, go down to the youngest child.
Okay, and so I can't find this from the component manager under the children of marriage dialogue?
No, it's the sort is a field or instance specific thing. It doesn't happen. There's no sort of automatic built-in sorting for a particular dialogue. Dialogues don't sort themselves. You have to, when you add a repeat field in a document or you add a repeat in a computation, you have to tell HotDocs explicitly, okay, it doesn't matter how the user entered this information. We want to have them, we want to sort it based on date of birth or whatever other sort you want to use. So every time you use it, you have to tell it how you want it sorted. It's theoretically possible to sort a dialogue as user enters the information, but it requires a lot of scripting, and it's not something that you can just say, oh, this dialogue always sorts, on child of birth, I should say. Did you have any, okay, 1 second. Okay, so Mark, I've made you organizer. Okay, so did you have any questions about this part of the homework, Andres? The children of the marriage repeat?
Yeah, no, I think my questions were, I guess, maybe a little general about what was being said. I think, and I'm sorry, I wrote it down last night when I was doing my homework, but one of them was like, you talked about multiple document assembly, and I wanted to know more about that. And then another question I had noted here is like, you talked about there was a developer guide for uploading templates to LHI when you were going through all the steps. And I also wanted to know where that was. I can't seem to have any specific questions right now in this part.
Okay, so let me answer the question about multiple document assembly. So just kind of a summary of what that means is that when you upload a hot docs template to LHI, oftentimes you will be uploading a template that is designed to produce a number of logical documents. In other words, you might want to upload the petition for divorce along with a summons, along with a financial statement, for example. So there were multiple documents involved, and you can upload a single template basically that produces all of those documents in one physical document. So the user downloads all of them. Excuse me, one second. The user downloads all of them at the same time in one, they just click once and they download everything, and contained in that one document is all the documents they need to file. The alternative, which you can do when you when you construct your interview, you can put script commands to assemble the documents separately. I don't think we're covering that in the training, but basically what happens is that each individual document, let's say a petition, a summons, and a financial statement, would be assembled separately, even though there's only one interview. And at the end, when the user goes to download the documents, they get to click and download those documents one at a time. And that's really a choice that you as a developer have to make. I think the argument for having one document is that it is easier. It's easier for the user because they won't make the mistake and not download all of their documents. But there are some situations where it may be desirable to have separate documents. One of them is, for example, if they're e-filing documents, then typically e-filing, you can't e-file one document that has multiple documents cooked into it. You have to e-file them separately. So there are pluses and minuses. I think probably 75–80% of the time, the choice is to have them download as one document because it's just simpler for the user. Then they can just print it out and file it as a paper document. The contributor guide, I think Mark just posted in the chat a link to it.
Awesome. And I guess the reason I asked Bart about the contributor guide was because I know that there was a point where you and I think this is on the next steps coming up on the homework, you open your upload button and it had that list to LHI and whatnot. And mine didn't, even though I had already been registered a while ago for LHI. So I think there is some connection there that I missed for why mine didn't show the LHI drop on the drop down menu.
Yeah, the reason that it didn't is that you have to there's a little something you have to install a link to LHI's upload page in your local installation of Hot Docs. And I believe the contributor guide tells you how to do that. There's something that you can download if you log in as a developer with your developer ID to LHI and you go to upload Hot Docs template, or if there's a button to that effect, then there's a link to download a little file that if you open it on a machine with Hot Docs installed, will actually add LHI as an upload destination. And you can also do it manually. There's a way to do it manually, but it's just easier to download that piece. So it's nothing to do. Go ahead.
Oh no, so I see what you're saying. I think there was something that said click here, so I clicked there, and then I downloaded it, but then I didn't know what to do with it. So I'm wondering if now that I reopened Hot Docs since last night and whatnot, if it would show, if that's what you're saying.
Well, you have to go to into Windows Explorer and double click on it to open it to run it, basically. And Hot Docs will open it and add the link.
Thank you. I'll follow the instructions on the guide that was posted here.
Oh, good. Okay. So other sort of general questions that you encountered?
I didn't encounter anything with the homework in particular, but I have started on my project and I have questions, general questions about that. So for instance, the first thing that I'm trying to do, we have one petition that we file all the time, and it can be one count or three, but it's always the same three to choose from. Does it make sense to create one document with the logic that would include all three of those? Is it possible to even do that, or should it just be three different petitions? Does that make sense?
It does. It's a good question. And I would say that, you know, sometimes it can be a little complicated to make that decision. There may be reasons to have separate templates, but probably in the vast majority of situations, it makes sense to have the same one template and have logic that inserts the counts as appropriate. Because I'm assuming that the counts are inserted. I'm assuming that there are choices that the user can make in the interview that would determine which counts to include. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I was thinking those could be check boxes. So if we're going to include, it's Nuisance Receivership and Abandoned Housing Act, and we do combinations thereof.
Yeah.
So I was thinking there could be check boxes that would include those counts, but then I got tripped up trying to, if this is checked, show this or hide this. And then it gets tricky with the language in terms of is or are, and adding the S's to the end.
Okay. Well, I think that's something that we could, Claudia, would be okay if we, you know, at some point scheduled a short session with Brittany to review some of that material or some of that stuff that she's trying to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we could take that offline, Brittany, and, you know, we can do a go to meeting with you and walk through some of it if you think that
Okay,
would be helpful.
Yeah,
And
that would
in
be
fact, for all of you, I think I've emailed every one of you seeing if we can meet next week or the following. But if I haven't emailed you, email me, because I do want to get together for half an hour with everybody in the cohort just to check in and focus on some of these other things that maybe may need attention depending on what you're trying to do, and just so I can surface out resources, examples, and in the gist of don't reinvent the wheel, other tools or approaches that other groups that are doing an amazing job with forms that you can adapt for your own use and incorporate into your project planning process.
Okay, so did you, Brittany, you also did the table for the in section, what was section 8 is now section 10, with the addresses and the people who live with the children. And how did that go?
I think this was simpler than the previous one, fewer moving parts. So in this one, it's a repeat field, but then you just select table, is that right?
You select the row in the table.
The row in the table.
Yeah. And what's odd about this is this kind of a hidden end repeat, right? Because normally there's an end repeat for the for a repeat. You don't see it here. You see an end repeat, but that end repeat is for the repeat of the persons who live with the children. And so the distinction here is, are you repeating the entire row, or are you just repeating some information within a cell in the row? So if you're just repeating information, if you just select a portion of a single cell, then it's going to put an end repeat, a visible end repeat, and it doesn't repeat the row, it repeats within the row. And if there's a repeat, if you select the entire row, then it repeats the entire row.
Is that what we did? Sorry, I can't
That's what you
remember.
did. Yes, you
Okay.
did. You selected the entire row. You added the repeat of children addresses, and you then created a nested dialogue, the persons who live with the children, and you added a repeat within that particular, with that last column, the cell in the last column, the with whom column. And did you run into, when you tried assembling the document, did you run into any issues?
Other than that one I mentioned where it wasn't pulling the petitioner's last name, but we got to the bottom of that with, I hadn't answered that. So,
Okay.
it's gonna make me go through the whole thing. I don't. Yeah, I don't think I had any issues. I don't know if you want me to test it now.
Well, you just did test it, and it didn't give you any errors, so that's a good thing.
Phew, okay.
Yes. Whether it assembled correctly, you know, sometimes it's always, testing is very important, and you probably can't test. There isn't enough time to test as much as it would really be nice to test. So, but testing is extremely important. And I don't know if you did, if you, in testing, one of the important things is to do a JavaScript test, and so that you get a sort of a preview of what it's going to look like in the browser.
Right.
So.
Hi, sorry, this is Devin. I was trying to raise something, but I was muted. So I did have an issue with that when I went to test, and with the caveat that like something, like I think I need to redo the whole homework because I was kind of lost and it was disjointed for me by some interruptions. So that caveat aside, when I went to test my test assemble with the addresses and with whom, it didn't make any sense from like the end user standpoint. There was just, when I got to that second screen, like after I'd entered the children's names and dates of birth, that table part, like where you enter the data, didn't make any sense. Like I couldn't figure out why. So like, I wonder if you could show what it looked like when you did it, Brittany. That would be helpful for me to make sure that I'm kind of help me figure out where I went wrong, I suppose.
I'm probably the worst person at showing, but if Andres wants to do it, I can't remember what I did.
Let me make him presenter. So. Andres, you are now able to share your screen. I might have muted you again when I made you. Let me try that again. Okay, Andres, I made you a presenter. I'm not seeing, oh, there we go. I'm not seeing any audio. There's no microphone for you, so I'm not sure. Can you speak? Okay, wait a minute, you're muted. Hold on a second.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Okay, go ahead. Yep.
And do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Awesome.
Yep.
Just okay, perfect. Just making sure I have the right screen. Okay. So this is the part that we're showing the table. I think I got this to work when I did it, but let's see. So basically, we're here on partially automate the first table in section 8.
Yep.
Okay. So like I think the first thing that I did was that we selected the whole thing. And when we selected this entire row, then we created this repeat. So I guess I'll go in here. Is this the best way to go into it?
Yeah, I mean, you could do a test of the entire template by clicking on the test assemble button.
Yeah, I think that's where I got stuck, was when you did test assemble. I entered like dummy names or whatever, like just test users, test children. But when it got to the point of entering or like getting to the point where it's like live with whom, it didn't make sense to me. And I'm wondering if I missed something.
Okay, so Andres, if you wouldn't mind, just give some, either load an answer file or give some, answer the required questions here. Oh, you know what?
I have some answer files that I use like for like the 3 children, but I don't know where to get them. I remember saving them.
Okay. Well, before you do,
would it help if I just shared my screen to show what my issue was?
Sure. I'm just, one thing, Andres, is that when you went to do the test assembly, you had just the repeat selected. So if you assemble the document or document preview, that's only going to show the code essentially. Just a little pointer there. But let me make a presenter, and it's going to take a few. Go to webinar is a little weird because when I make you a presenter, it takes a few minutes. Looks like it takes a few minutes for the audio to catch up. Okay, so we're seeing your screen, but let me see if we can hear you.
Okay, I think I'm able to.
Yep, good.
You can hear me? Okay, great.
Yep. Okay.
So yeah, I went in and put like test oldest, test middle, did the oldest is over 18 just to test like how that would work. And then when it got to here, like I don't understand what this means at all. Is this what it's supposed to look like?
No.
Okay, so I messed up somewhere.
Well, look, wait a minute. Let me just. Yes, that is correct. I'm sorry. That is correct. So, if you if you want to put in some answers and show us what it looks like.
But like, am I supposed to be retyping in one of these addresses that I put in already? Or like, what does this mean?
Well, the addresses that you put in are the addresses where the children currently live, but this is meant to be an address history of where the kids have lived for, I don't remember, for a period of years. So they, it's standard information that's usually required in a divorce case where there are children, that you need to list every place they've lived for, say, the last 5 years and who they live with. So it's a little different. It could be the same address as where they live now. And if you were doing, a complete automation of this, you would probably automate it in such a way that the user would not have to type in their current address. You could make, for example, you could make the address a multiple choice that consisted of their current address and other, and then the user could either select the current address or type in the other. There's probably a variety of ways of doing it, but it's actually a distinct piece of information, which is where did this kid live historically, and who did they live
Right.
with on a historical basis.
So it doesn't tell you which child you're supposed to be entering that information with or for, I guess, or is it just the number one corresponds to this number one? Is that
No,
how
yeah, it's been all of the children on the assumption that all of the children always live together, which is not always a good assumption, but for purposes of training, we tried to make it fairly simple. And I think the original version of this template actually assumed that all the children lived together. In real life, they might not, and that gets quite complicated to automate if you have to deal with, whether the children live together or
Yeah,
not.
that's understandable. I just wanted, because it made no sense, it didn't make sense to me, so I wondered if I was missing something, but yeah, no, that's that makes sense that you're just trying to make it, like give us a training example. So okay, so that clears it up for me then. That
Okay.
I because like I said, I was a bit disjointed. I thought I was missing something, but if not,
Nope.
then I feel better.
Yep,
So
it
thank
looks
you.
like you did what was specified, so that's good. So the other piece, the other substantial piece of the training was the creating a custom interview. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch back to Andres as presenter. Maybe if Andres, if you could talk a little bit about that piece. And you're in here twice. Once is self-muted, and we're not seeing your screen. So
Yeah, this is kind of like the same thing that happened last time. I apologize. Let me see if I can because I think honestly is the other one, because now I'm like trying to do this on okay, got it. Awesome.
okay.
And so we are in the component manager. Okay. Sorry, I do all these things and then I don't remember how to get to them.
Yeah.
So I know I'm gonna start by looking at for the component variable, but let me know if there is another way that I should get to it.
One quick way to get to it is to click on the component file properties button, which is on the left hand side just below the little disk emblem. It looks like a hand. Go back to the component manager.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then on the left hand side, go up a couple of icons toward the top, second one down from the top. It looks like a hand. Yeah, you got it. Okay. And then click on interview.
All right.
And there you go. If you click on that, you can open the custom interview from right there. So you've got all your asks and you've got your logic around the children. Any questions about this, or did you run into any issues?
I don't think I ran into any issues, but honestly, I was just doing it, following what you were doing and hoping that at some point it would click better.
Okay.
It was confusing to say the least, but it didn't give me any trouble at the end when I finished that part.
Okay. So just to rehash, and then if folks have questions, we can certainly answer them. To the concepts here, Hot Docs basically has two ways of presenting the interview, asking the user for information. One is if you use generate default interview, it will ask questions automatically. And it will, if there's a dialogue that has a variable linked to it, it will ask that dialogue. And it asks it in the order that it encounters the variables in the template. So and it also does it based on relevancy. In other words, if there's logic around a variable that says, show that, insert this information sometimes and not others, when Hot Docs runs a default interview, it will honor that logic. So if you have logic that says if children of the marriage TF, and that encompasses a section of the template, and within that section are variables, Hot Docs won't try to ask those variables unless children of the marriage is true, unless the user has answered yes to that question. That is not, the default interview is often not the ideal way of presenting things, because sometimes you want to ask things in a different order. You want to ask the user who they are, for example, before you ask what court, what judicial district they're in. So, and that kind of thing. So that's where the custom interview comes in. It allows you to control exactly what gets asked when. The downside of that is that you actually have to do the work to figure out, to script that interview so that it does only ask, that it asks for the information it needs and only asks for information that it needs, because the ideal outcome is that the user is not asked about children, for example, if there are no children. The idea behind that is we don't want to replicate the experience of filling out a form where they go down through the form and it says, what are the names of your children, when they don't have any children. We just want to shortcut that if there are no children.
I think that, yeah, that makes a lot of sense now that you like recap on what we did here. I think there was a part that was like very confusing to me, which was when you said on the video, like basically, and I don't remember the exact line, but it was like something like, we are telling Hot Docs to do this, and Hot Docs knows what to do based on what I told them, even though I didn't tell him to do that. And I'm sorry, I'm being vague on this, but that was like kind of like the synopsis of the part that I got confused in, and I think it had to be with that if children of the marriage TF.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you go to your, if you go back to the template, and you can just jump right over to, you can just click on Word. So there isn't, I guess there's no logic in the template, but you could make paragraph 10, what's paragraph 10 here, and the preceding paragraph, you could enclose those in logic so that it only comes in if there are children. It only comes in if the user says there are children. And then the effect of that would be the same as the logic in your custom interview, which it was only ask about children if you answered yes to that question. So, and it's really, sometimes you can do kind of a quick, simple template without constructing a custom interview, and sometimes you really need a custom interview, and sometimes you're doing a lot of other fancy stuff in the custom interview. For example, we touched on multiple document assembly. If you wanted to do multiple document assembly, it would be possible without a custom interview, but a lot of times you'd have to use a custom interview because, for example, if there are 5 possible documents and you don't want to produce, if you wanted to produce in some circumstances 1, 3, and 5, and in other circumstances 2 and 4, you'd probably have to use a custom interview to do that. So it's a complicated decision, and the custom interview really, again, if you're doing an A to J interview, you may not need a custom interview because the custom interview is really designed to present information to a user. And you know, for testing purposes, you might want to do something like that, but you might not, you know, it might not be necessary. Because if you're just testing a template to make sure it works, then you don't particularly care what order things are asked in or how they're organized. But if you're presenting the interview to a user, then that becomes very important. Any other issues or questions that you had about interviews?
I think to just confirm what you said, it's like maybe on my free time I can do like an if pregnancy TE similar to this, but one for this paragraph 10. Is that sort of what you were mentioning, so that like this paragraph that says number 10 require information regarding the children would only
Yep.
show up? Okay, I see.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and to do that, I would just follow the same steps prior to this section on the homework, right? And try to get that to work in there.
Yeah, exactly. You would do essentially what you did with the pregnancy, with if pregnancy TF.
Okay.
I mean, within the children of the marriage, you know, you could exclude that. You could exclude that with the same logic, or you could put logic in that paragraph that says, you know, there are no children of the marriage, and that would be a, you know, that decision would be based on, you know, what the court wants to do, how the court wants to see it. Is it a court form that has mandatory information? You know, a lot of court forms will have a checkbox that says, you know, there are children, you know, there are no children. And, you know, in that instance, you would check the appropriate boxes. And whether you exclude a paragraph or you just put not applicable, all that kind of stuff, those are decisions that have to be made, you know, in consultation with a subject matter expert who knows what the court's expecting. I mean, the court may want to have a paragraph that says there are no children when there are no children, or they may be happy just to, if you just leave it out. And again, it depends on what the court's requirements are. Other questions about that? And other folks on the call, I think, let me just check and see if you're all unmuted. Yeah, you're all self-muted, so feel free. Oh, wait a minute, let me unmute the other folks, and you're both self-muted, Jennifer and Shahada. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in and ask them at this point. Okay, so Shahada says none. And again, Brittany and Andres and Devin, if you have questions at this point, we can certainly.
I have another question.
Sure.
Going back to this part where you did the there if count children are, and then the else if, or if it's, you know, one child or zero, is this sort of, I guess I was wondering if there is a possibility to also doing this instead of like replacing the is and the are and the child and the children, to put in two different sentences. So like if like 0 or 1, put this sentence, there is, you know, 0 children, and if it's like more than this, then put like there are and calculate the number of children. Does that make any sense?
Well, I think if you're just trying to distinguish between there being one child or more than one, then it makes sense to do just as one sentence, because when if there are any children, their names and dates of birth and their addresses, and you don't want that sentence twice. But if you're talking about the distinction between there are no children or there are one or more children, then yes, I think you could certainly have two separate sentences, although the word there may come in all instances, and I suppose the word are could come.
Hello?
Hello? I don't.
Hello.
Hi. So the bus went away. I was wondering what was happening. Can we still hear Bart? Because Bart kind of disappeared. No, there is a problem on Bart's end. Bart, I'm gonna mute you to see if the bus goes away, like we hear a background bus. Yeah, it seems like something is coming from your connection, Bart. Okay, and I'm gonna make Mark. Mark, you're already an organizer?
Yeah, I lost my audio there for a couple of minutes.
Now you're good. Now we hear
Yeah.
you loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back on.
Yeah. Okay. So, other questions before we end today's session? Our next session is essentially the last session where Mark and I will be involved, essentially involved, and it's kind of the last hot docs related session. We're going to talk about some general methodology for developing templates. So it's less technical, more theoretical than the last couple of sessions, the last 2 or 3 sessions we've had. We'll also talk about, and this is more technical, we'll talk about providing guidance to users in the interview. So showing information to the users to help them in their how to answer questions, and offering them guidance in terms of how to navigate the interview and where to go next. And then we'll have a general review of places that you can go, continuing your education, you know, going further and learning more about hot docs, because there is a substantial amount to learn beyond what we've covered in the basic training. So last call for any questions before we break for today.
We have a willing presenter for next week. I know it's kind of a shrinking group, but Devin, you did one way back, I think, in the first review. Would you be willing to be our show and tell person next week?
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent. Yeah, this is the lightest homework, I think, of the course in some ways. So enjoy it.
Great, thanks.
I guess we're good, Bart.
Okay,
Claudia?
very good.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put the developer guide. I don't know if we have it in one of the folders, but I'm gonna put it with this recording. When I upload the recording, I'll put it there. The other thing is that we have a call on the 27th. It's our monthly community call, and the focus is gonna be on how hot docs and Word can work really well together and can be really powerful. So that's on the 27th at 2 p.m. and I put it in the list. I hope that all of you are on the list and are getting that. But if not, it's also posted in the probono.net LHI page. So that's the monthly developer call, and it's gonna go more in depth in some topics about. Mark, do you want to share a little bit more, like check boxes and buttons and that kind of thing?
Some of the fun aspects of automating a Word document that show up in actual court forms, like multiple sections with footers and headers and pagination, which we'll just touch on briefly, and how you implement checkboxes. So stay tuned, but I would encourage you to join those calls and all those calls every month, every 2 months.
Yeah, so that's on the 27th at 2 p.m. Okay, so we'll connect again next Wednesday, and all of this is gonna go up by Friday into the weekly folder. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Hi, Claudia.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, are you still there?
I was just gonna click yes.
I will. I wanted to ask the question, but I didn't think it was like for like everyone. But it's about one thing that you and I think it might have been Bart, but maybe it was somebody else in one of the LHI calls early on this year that you talked about the email feature from the LHI
Yeah, yeah.
and I wanted to
Let
see
me call you back. Do you want to connect? 'Cause I can call you back right now. I think I'm open because I think I'm still recording.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, let me call you right back. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. Bye.